Good evening. As I was thinking about this project, I really pulled out 4 key areas that I think allow educators to build in challenging and ambitious curriculum into their classrooms. And one of the first areas I think is beginning with a challenging curriculum. We should not shy away from challenging content, but we have to ensure that it is approached in a way that is respectful of the individual learning needs of the students. Larson and Kuiper make an excellent point when they say that learning preferences do not mean that students learn differently. Rather, it's just that they prefer one method over another. Because of this, we can incorporate multiple perspectives into our content. We can include imagery, we can include videos, we can include music, we can include art, and we can even include folk narratives that give students a different perspective that they might not have seen before. And in doing so, they get to learn a new way to approach the curriculum and a different perspective to see. Also, content that is challenging means that students walk away knowing not only more about themselves, but also about the content as well. Our content should teach them that the skills will help them solve problems in the future. This also means that we need to communicate ahead of time what our expectations are for students. As Larson and Kuiper note again, this allows them to know ahead of time what they will need to concentrate on. I know this from working in my school this semester that high expectations aren't always greeted warmly by students. However, when you start from day one and you start small, and over time as you build on those little foundations that you lay over time, students get to see not only new perspectives, but they get to see themselves in the story, and they also get to see their growth over time. And that is a huge boost to students who generally have not performed well in school before. It's all about little steps that increases their motivation and their willingness to work in the classroom. Wise and ambitious practices also begin with planning. If you want to challenge students, you have to build those challenges in right from the start. Backwards design, I think, is really key to this process because it allows you to begin with the set standards and goals that you identify for the class, and then you shape your curriculum and your content around those standards and goals. Lesson planning is a difficult process for students in this setting, especially me moving into the educational field experience. I learned a lot this semester about lesson planning and what you really need to focus on, and by identifying the standards first, you kind of set your path as you move on throughout not only the week ahead, but the weeks and the units that are to come. These standards help keep your curriculum focused, and they help you as you move on throughout the days and the weeks ahead. A third opportunity that I think teachers have to build in a challenging and ambitious curriculum comes when you incorporate concepts into the social studies classroom. In their text focusing on English language learners, Barbara Cruz and Stephen Thornton, they argue that effective social studies instruction emphasizes the relationship among concepts. Now, concepts in the social studies classroom are very important because they provide sometimes it's just a small foundation, but it's a foundation nonetheless that allows students to approach a complex problem. Many of the problems that students encounter in the social studies do not have simple black and white answers. And in many ways, this allows the educator to mirror the decisions that students will face in real life. For example, one of the topics I have worked with and enjoyed working with students on this semester was World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. And in general, the Treaty of Versailles helped set the stage for World War II because of the way the Allies treated the German people after the war. And it allows students to really focus in on how power dynamics and how we treat people after a conflict leads to consequences down the road. And this is important because they get to see that the decisions they make and the decisions that are made have consequences for the future, no matter how big or how small those decisions may be. Concepts like the enemy are important because it lays this foundation for students. And when we build standards and goals around those concepts, we can build effective and engaging lessons that really help students to focus on what's going on in the content, but also the skills that let them look down the road to think about what might be happening in the future. This is an important skill for students to have because it will impact them in college, it will impact them during their careers, and it will impact them during life. Having the skills to solve problems and to anticipate consequences is a key to achieving success in life, and social studies educators are well placed to teach students these skills. Lastly, I think another key for educators is that you have to put people first in the social studies classroom. Of all the things we deal with, facts, dates, places, I always believe that people are the most important. People and the decisions that they make given the circumstances that they are facing at the time. This is key because it is one of the most important things that students can grab a hold of and incorporate into their own lives. Students throughout a given year will encounter hundreds of different perspectives in this case, and one or two of those will speak to them, and they can incorporate their own narratives, their own stories onto those, and they can see how that impacts their lives. And in essence, you are empowering them in the future to solve problems and to think about their problems in a different way. It's an essential skill that, again, builds off of concepts and builds off of standards. And in doing all these things, I think you can build a classroom that teaches students that challenges are good and that challenges will help them in the future, and that being ambitious is a key to achieving success in life. Over the semester, I had the chance to work with several different educational strategies, and I want to pull out a couple of those because I really think they speak to an ambitious classroom design. One of the first I really enjoyed working with was having students design their own newspaper headlines given a story. One of the ones we worked with was on labor strikes, and we allowed the students to read just a little brief section of the history of the strikes and allow them to create their own narratives. And it was really interesting to see as they pulled out concepts like how many people died, they pulled out concepts of violence, they pulled out concept of workers' rights. Each student pulled out something different from that little bit of the content. It was only a little piece of content, but they all focused on something different, and they all pulled a unique perspective out of that. That speaks to how students learn differently, but it also speaks to how the different perspective will empower them to see the world differently in the future. I also played around with some statistics and giving students numbers and facts and letting them react to them. Things like poverty, income level in sociology. It really allows students to see how the world is, and then they get to play around with questions of equality, questions of how the world works, and what they will face in their own lives. This is important because it allows students to see what the world is like, and it also allows them to see the world they're going into in the near future for jobs, for education, and for their any future opportunities that they may have. These ambitious practices really boil down to challenging students. An ambitious and wise classroom is one that challenges students to see the world differently. It is a classroom that challenges students to think differently. And it's a classroom that allows them to see their own perspectives and lifestyles in the content that you give. A challenging classroom and an ambitious classroom is difficult to build for every student. Every student is different. But I think by putting people first and their stories first, by taking on concepts and laying foundations for students, by planning yourself, and by challenging students to think and act and to try and reason out problems, I think you give them the skills and the lessons that will help them build successful lives for themselves and their families in the future. And what more could a social studies educator want to achieve in their classrooms? Have a great day, guys.